I thought about introducing Grace Aheron with a list of her attributes and accolades, how vibrant, funny, and generous she is, how effectively she organizes retreats, conferences, workshops, and actions, and how she's one of my 3-year-old's very favorite people, and I'll be honest, mine too. All of these are worthy of acknowledgement and celebration, but I'm not sure that they convey to you who Grace is and why she is uniquely suited to speak to us about creativity today and community. Last June, I joined a rather eclectic group of Charlottesville community members who gathered together to fold origami cranes, 1,000 of them. Grace had invited us to join her in a tradition and spiritual practice rooted in her family's legacy and in an act of resistance and hope at the beginning of what was a long, difficult, and tragic summer. Many of us had never folded an origami crane before, and our progress was painstakingly slow. To be honest, I think Grace probably ended up folding most of them herself. She patiently taught us and reminded us again how to fold the cranes. And she joyfully accepted the lumpy, misshapen, bulbous birds that we brought her. If you look closely at this, you'll find them. I'm gonna let Grace tell you what the symbolism of those cranes are and what happened after they'd all been folded. What I will say is this: when Grace is involved, this scene, that of a diverse group of people engaged together in a creative act of resistance and community building, is not rare. She is indeed a people weaver, and she does not use creativity solely as a means of self-expression, nor does she operate from a fear that creativity is a limited resource. Instead, she roots her creative practices in her ancestral heritage and faith tradition, and engages them to connect, build, and mobilize community, trusting that creativity is abundant and accessible by all. Please welcome Grace.
Oh boy. She's gonna make me cry. I'm gonna start by saying I have a cough that I've been nursing for like 2.5 weeks. The herbalists tell me it's because I'm mourning. So sorry if I cough. I got my Ricolas over there. And thanks, Lindsay. And we're gonna do this 90s style where I say like slide, because it's not working, but we were all alive in the 90s except for Ruby maybe, so that's fine. I'm gonna go off mic for a second. You can go to the first slide. This is an intense time for all of us, and for me and people I love especially, what this weekend marks. So I wanted to just start by reminding us that this space is sacred together. This candle will burn throughout our time, and if it burns out, we have an extra one. But may it serve as a reminder of the ones who've come before us and the ones who are going to come after us, who are fighting and organizing to make this world more beautiful. And whenever I start organizing meetings, I'm infamous or famous for making people sing, because I think it's something I love to do, and it's an important way for us to get out of our minds, and to get, especially for white people, into like that vulnerable space of putting your sound out there. So we're gonna do a song together. I'm gonna lead it call and response to start, and then after that we can sing it together. So first, call and response. May the life I lead, speak for me. Speak for me. May the life I lead, speak for me. Speak for me. When I come to the end of the road, and I lay down my heavy load. May the life I lead, speak for me. Speak for me. That was super pretty. So the first part is call and response, and then when it gets to when I come to the end of the road and I lay down my heavy load, we sing that part together, and I'll go like this to remind you. Okay, here we go, from the top. May the life I lead, speak for me. Speak for me. May the life I lead, speak for me. Speak for me. When I come to the end of the road and I lay down my heavy load, may the life I lead, for me. May the land I tend, speak for me. Speak for me. May the land I tend, speak for me. Speak for me. When I come to the end of the road, and I lay down my heavy load, may the land I tend, speak for me. Speak for me. May my community, speak for me. Speak for me. May my community, speak for me. Speak for me. When I come to the end of the road, and I lay down my heavy load, may my community, speak for me. Speak for me. Give yourself a round of applause. That was beautiful. All right, now that we're all nice and out of our heads, to the PowerPoint presentation. So I wanted to start opening this space by bringing in one of my chosen ancestors. This is Grace Lee Boggs. She passed away in 2015, and she was a Chinese-American anti-racist organizer who lived in Detroit for most of her life. And I'm bringing Grace into this space not only because we share the same name, and that's really cool, but because I think as people who consider themselves creatives or artists, it's important that we recognize our legacies. Because I think if we don't locate ourselves in a tradition or a line of people or reckon with our own identities, we run the risk of becoming apolitical or ahistorical. And oftentimes that's in opting out of accountability for people with privilege. And especially on the week, or on this particular week, on this anniversary weekend, we can't afford for anyone to be opting out of their own work. And we all need to be doing this work together, this healing, creative work. So this is Grace, and I never met her, but I imagine she was about as wonderful as she looks here. And Grace once said, "The most revolutionary thing I ever did was stay put." She lived almost all of her life in Detroit working with the Black Power movement, which in the middle of the 20th century was pretty cool for a woman and for a Chinese American woman to be doing. And Grace, always soundly located herself in her physical place and the political moment. And I think there's a lot to learn from that in our work as creatives. There's this really awesome documentary about her life that I recommend to everyone. And the opening scene of this documentary, she's, I think 92 or something. She died at 100. She's 92 and she's walking with her walker on this really broken sidewalk in Detroit, and behind her there's this empty lot with lots of trash, and then in the background there's the giant facade of a brick building that used to be an auto manufacturer that has since collapsed and the windows are broken in. It's a pretty intense post-industrial scene, and the camera zooms into her face and she says, "I feel so sorry for anybody who doesn't live in Detroit right now." And you're like, what? Doesn't look that great, Grace. But what she highlights in her work and throughout her life is that capitalism didn't work in Detroit. It was a project that failed. And the low income, particularly Black community, was left behind because they were no longer profitable. And the people, the collective power there, had to vision something new. And I don't mean at all to romanticize the poverty that's in Detroit or how difficult it must be to live there. But I think this sentiment of building community outside of or without political and economic structures is why I'm here today. Because, spoiler alert, or I'll let you in on a little secret, I don't primarily identify as a creative or as an artist. I didn't get an art degree, and you can see some of my work about the room. It's not a very extremely high level of craftsmanship. But through Grace and through my community organizing and activism work, I've learned that building community is an act of creation. And we need that to survive. We need community to survive together. So hers is the legacy that I'm in, this legacy of community builders, community creators, and it's one that I try to honor. And so I'm bringing her into this space, and maybe at this time we can all call to mind someone or some ones in whose legacy we locate ourselves and for whom we are grateful. Wow, that was good, you knew. So Grace is gonna, in the spirit of learning from our ancestors, Grace is going to help guide us today. Can I get somebody with a loud voice to read out the quotation on the screen?
Revolution that is based on the people exercising their creativity in the midst of devastation is one of the great historical contributions of humankind.
Thanks, Jordan. So, I think you can go to the next slide. Yeah, go back to the other one. Okay, so this is how it's going to be this morning, y'all. So for me, a integral and completely necessary and complementary part of the creative act is a tearing down. The creative act of building community is a tearing down or a destruction, if that word doesn't make you too jumpy. And that's a destruction of the structures in the world that keep people from being free. I like to think of this idea as a volcano, partly because my people are from Hawaii, but a volcano is a force that is at once a destroyer and a creator, right? It's literally creating new earth as it's coming up out of the ground, while also wiping away everything that's in its path. And I like to think about destruction as a necessary part of creation because, especially when we're creating community, because it's really hard for communities to thrive when there are oppressive structures in the way of people's very lives. It's hard for a community to thrive if you can't afford to eat, or live in a safe home, or if you're afraid of your kids being killed by the cops. And so part of my creative community building has been this tearing down of that which separates us, or a tearing down of that which helps people be free. And that's happened mostly in the form of protest. Great. Just gonna do a little affected thing. So I think of protest as creative disturbance. It's this creativity that happens, as Grace says, in the midst of the very real devastation that life can be. And this destructive act, this protesting as destructive and creative act has been a large part of the way that I've spent my time in Charlottesville so far. So that's looked like standing in front of the Charlottesville Police Department / City Hall / General District Court, the activist location trifecta in Charlottesville. It's looked like that. It's also looked like going up to the ICE occupation for the protests in Philly and bringing solidarity from our town here in Charlottesville. It's also looked like my partner and I building a triptych altar and holding a vigil for Sage Smith, who's a Black trans woman who's been missing in Charlottesville and is not yet found, and demanding justice for her. It's also looked like doing a pop-up sparkly nail station at protests, because sometimes people just need a little razzle-dazzle while you're out there chanting and singing. It's looked like banner drops from the parking garage and banner drops in front of our beloved Congressman, Tom Garrett. Beloved. I'm amongst friends here, right? Yeah, I know. He's really excited about what's happening. It's looked like making banners and taking them to Morocco after the election, this past year's election, when I was there for a climate change conference for the United Nations. And it's looked like leading worship services or spiritual grounding and meditation for primarily Muslim people the day after Donald Trump was elected. It's looked like building giant puppets and learning how to walk and dance with them, and building giant coffins, which I won't say anything else about. You can stay there for a while. So protest is a word that you might be more familiar with, but for me, the word I'd like to talk a little bit more about in my creative destructive work is direct action. So the exciting thing to me about these kind of moments that we've just looked at is that you get to change the status quo for a few hours or even for a few days. That could be visually with like banners or posters, or even a group of people gathering for some reason. When folks march down the mall, everyone's like, ooh, what's happening, right? Like it's a disruption of the status quo. Or you might be disrupting it sonically with singing or chanting, or just by bringing attention to something that wouldn't normally get noticed. And so direct action specifically, which I've been engaged in a lot since I've been in Charlottesville, these sort of things can feel like a show or a demonstration. I mean, the word demonstration is often used, but really what it's about is power and changing power and people claiming power back. So direct action is folks taking collective action to change their own circumstances and not waiting for a middle party to arbiter power back to them. Malcolm X says that power never takes a step back except in the face of more power. So when you think about really famous direct actions throughout history, Gandhi's Salt Satyagraha, the Greensboro lunch counter sit-ins, marches, blah, 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 you guys know what I'm saying. That was people power collectively organizing to push it back against greater powers, like government powers or economic powers. I think you can go to the next slide. And to me, one of the greatest examples in recent history of how the destructive and creative process is necessary when we're talking about social change was the encampment that happened at Standing Rock. This is me and my friend Claire, who were up there for a while in October when they were camped out, and we brought a bunch of prayer flags that Charlottesville community members had made, and we offered them on the fence there. And Standing Rock is an incredible example to me because it was at once demanding an end to corporate oil and to people coming and seizing native land, while also demonstrating what kind of world we want to live in. People were fed for months and months at Standing Rock without spending a dime. They were clothed and they were taking care of each other. There was herbal medicine. There were midwives, so babies could be born. Kids got dropped off at the bus there. It was this, it's incredible. This village, really, where we were both demonstrating what needed to be destroyed and what needed to be created. Oh boy. So we take these actions, I was just getting my time markers. So we take these actions so that communities can be free, but while we're doing that, community building itself is also possible. I'm gonna read these now because I don't have that much time left. So building community is to the collective as spiritual practice is to the individual, Grace said. So in this creative work of getting our communities free through direct action or through protest, we're also building community in the midst of doing that. And we have to be living in community to survive in that way. And I like to talk about it as we're destroying these structures of the world, what's on the other side? Like, what are we building that's on the other side as an offering? And so the project that I've poured my heart into as a community building offering on the other side of what we're destroying is this place, the Karis community. I moved back to Charlottesville 4 years ago to move on to 8 acres of land with friends, and the dream was to live in covenanted relationship and begin in a creative experiment together where we could daily enact our ideals of justice. And sometimes we call it a demonstration plot for the world we want to live in. So that looks like hosting free herbalism classes to, learn how to harvest stuff from our garden. That looks like, you can go to the next one. That looks like throwing awesome parties where little people go and collect eggs from our chickens in butterfly catching nets. Oh, you guys got to linger on that one. It's pretty cute. Whoop. Okay, whatever. I'm just going to keep talking. It was where we grow food. We offer hospitality. Right now, we're hosting 4 trans women from Honduras and El Salvador who are seeking asylum here, who were a part of the refugee caravan earlier this year. And we offer spiritual grounding through worship services and community collective art. This is a mural done by one of my dear friends, Ellie. So Karis is a place where I try to help people live into and physically experience what's waiting on the other side when we tear down these structures of oppression. And we want to build these communities that are, the word I like to use is irresistible, and not because they're cool or flashy or they make you feel like, oh, I'm so whatever, but because they make you feel whole, and it's a place where everyone has access to community. And when you build irresistible communities, that's how you draw people into this creative, destructive work. Yeah. So our final Grace Lee Boggs quote today is, "Talk and write in a way that encourages the mutual exchange of ideas and acts like a midwife to people birthing their own ideas." And for me, when I'm doing this activism work or this creative destructive work, whatever you want to call it, I want to be doing it in a way that invites others in and inspires them to be enacting their own ideas here in Charlottesville and in their own places. An example of doing that lately is the project I'm a part of called the Carnival De Resistance. We just finished up our 7th residency in Philadelphia. It's you can just scroll through some of these, 30-day, 30-person artist residency where we live off the grid for 30 days, cook on rocket stoves, use composting toilets, and put on performances, carnival performances that animate the ideas of anti-capitalism and environmental justice and eco-justice. So here's there's dancing and, okay, you can stay on that last one. Dancing and music and a carnival midway that happens before. The midway is where you do the games and everything, but our games are like beanbag toss, knock down the corporate giants, or like a burlesque show that's stripping off white supremacy. So it's using play and creativity to both critique the structures of power that be, and also it's a literal world. We put up the big top or go into a church and create an encampment where people can step into this other way of being, where we can, in the carnival tradition, poke fun at the king. The fool is the king for the day, and really invite people into that physical transformation. And the final example that I'll talk about of this creative process of inviting people in, Lindsay keyed up for me a little bit. Last summer I organized the folding of what ended up being 1,400 paper cranes. Here's some shots of people patiently folding in my house and some nice, pixelated dark photos of folks folding inside the church where I live. But when I was thinking about how to resist white supremacy that was coming to Charlottesville, last summer I thought first about the legacy of my ancestors who had resisted white supremacy. I had family members who were interned in Japanese concentration camps and who faced all manner of economic difficulties crossing to Hawaii. And I'd learned how to fold paper cranes from my grandmother, who had learned from her grandmother. So we folded these cranes, some of which are here. And the tradition of folding 1,000 paper cranes is that if you do fold 1,000, you're granted a wish. And our wish was the eradication of white supremacy. So in each crane that was folded, I had people either write or bless into it a way that they were committing to eradicating white supremacy in their own life. And then we put these cranes up. Awesome. So this is a nice little hipster photo. It's not mine, of the Polaroid and then a picture of the Polaroid, meta. I found it on the internet. We put the cranes up to fly above the KKK rally and offer both beautiful inspiration to people, but also to draw them deeper into their own work. Because when I was explaining it to them, I would say, oh, this is so beautiful. It's about peace, right? And I'm like, no, it's about fighting white supremacy. And let me tell you why. So this is a cool participatory art project that we did at my house to, draw people deeper into the work. And the final image that I'll leave you with is of my great-great-grandmother who immigrated to Hawaii in the early 20th century. And this is her at her 88th birthday, which is a significant number for Japanese women. And my family, you can see behind her, folded 1,000 red paper cranes, which is a lucky color for us. Just as I'll leave her up here just as a reminder to, again, claim your own tradition and remind you of the people that have gone before you and gone before me who have been doing this work. And I think, again, I will say I'm not an artist. I barely consider myself a creative, but this talk has given me sort of the kick in the pants to realize that everyone can claim their own creativity. And I would commend to you all, especially this weekend, where it is so acutely, where we become so acutely aware that we need creative structures and transformation in society, to step into that place for yourself and to do whatever kind of work you need to do in that space. So thanks for letting me share.